Hey everybody, it's Pete A. Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. Just bringing you today's intro. Joe Duca is a movie creator, made a movie called Evergreen about a couple that goes up into the mountains to sort out, like, is this going to happen? Are we going to get married? And they take on an early 90s theme of brutal honesty. You saw this theme in things like The Proposal and, also in Jerry Maguire, there's some brutal honesty going on. Anyhow, this theme carries into this movie, and a couple tries to sort out their past and what happens next. And it's this, if you watch Evergreen, you can watch it on Amazon. I think you'll enjoy it. It is a Christmas movie, but I think more importantly, it's a dramatic, romantic, and sometimes not romantic movie that makes you feel really uncomfortable in a very positive way. I think you guys will dig it. The conversation with Joe was a lot of fun. We talk about his craft, the decision he makes in the movie, and I hope you guys all enjoy that. In general, some things that I always need to mention. One, I appreciate everybody that comes out and listens to the Break It Down show. If you're listening on the podcast side, obviously you're doing that at your favorite location. My favorite location for you is to listen on YouTube. They monetize for us. We're climbing the charts in terms of podcasts and subscriptions and that kind of thing, and that puts a little bit of money in the pocket. You want to know how to support the show. If you're so inclined, you can always go to the PayPal link on the very front page of breakitdownshow.com, and you can click on that. And this is in effect a subscription. It's almost like Patreon, where first off, I don't have to pay Patreon any money to do this. It's just a transaction. And all I really need are you and your support. So if it's $5 a month, okay, that's fine. $20, hey, whatever. A small amount of money goes a long way. If you want to put in one big lump sum, I promise I'm going to put this money to work on the show, whether it's buying ads, equipment, getting us on the road. Just yesterday, John and I worked out a deal. We're going to go out and we're going to travel around Tennessee for about a week this September and grab shows. This is what that money does. It puts us on the road. It gives us a chance to continue to grow the show and find fantastic new guests. Okay. One more thing to bring up, and then we'll get right back over to Joe. Save the Brave, savethebrave.org. We're getting ready for the Ride for the Brave for this summer. It's forming up. I think it's going to be more of a relay than one long haul this year, but I'm going to do my best to be part of it again. And if you want to be a part of the Save the Brave, Ride for the Brave rally, then let me know. Pete at breakitdownshow.com. I'll get you in contact with the folks over at Save the Brave, and we can figure out logistically what that is. What kind of help do we need? Well, maybe you're riding the motorcycle. Maybe you're in the support truck. Maybe you're just going to meet us at one of the waypoints, Tucson, Dallas, wherever it's going to be. Maybe that's how you do it. Maybe you know someone who's famous and can bring a crowd from your area. It can be a regionally famous person, a newscaster, or someone that, like, when they say, hey, Ted's going to be down at Tucson at the VFW, and they'll draw a crowd. That kind of person. We would love to have that kind of thing. So this is what we're talking about. Getting some people to come out and support Save the Brave through the Harley Davidson dealerships primarily is, I think, where we're going to do these things. And if that's not your bag, whatever you're doing, do charity. Get out there and go support charities and make sure that you're doing your best to do your part. All right, one more thing to say to you, and that's, here comes Joe Duca.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Joe Duca, and you're watching The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Man, I'm super excited to have you on. You're the second indie-type movie-based guest I've had on today. Earlier, we had on a guy from a movie called No Place, and he starred in the movie. His name is Benjamin Madrid. And what I wanted to say about indie movies is this. One, surprises can happen when you guys make your movies because not every unknown is known. There are sacrifices made to budget and time and all these things that, multi-$100 million movies, they don't have these problems. They have other problems. But they're also, when you guys make movies, you're making it from, it's like more of a, not that they're not passion projects for those guys, but money is a bigger motive than it is necessarily in an indie film.
Well, all we have is passion.
Right.
We don't even have the camera.
Yeah, exactly. I rented that. Don't drop that. Yeah. And the thing
that belongs to my cousin's uncle's best friend's girlfriend.
It's not a sequel. It's not a prequel. It's not an in-between. It's not a reboot. It's not a comic book movie. You know, like these are movies about passion. They're from the heart, from top to bottom. No one's getting paid what they deserve to get paid. You guys do it first and foremost because of the art. And I, if nobody else thanks you today, I'm going to do it. Thank you for making this movie. Thank you for giving people work and doing something that looked great, sounded great, felt great. I loved the movie. It's called Evergreen, everybody. I'll put the thing up here in the thing. And if you're wondering what to do, but I've been pitching everybody on, Joe. We're not going to theaters. Go to Amazon, use the link that I provided. That helps me, that helps these guys, and watch this movie. If you want to watch it somewhere else, great. But spend the $5, the $6, whatever it's going to be, and watch these movies, because these guys are people that you want to back up. It's just, and look, the movie it's a wonderful exploration. And I don't know if any big studio would have the guts to make a movie like this. Not that it's controversial, not that it's impossible, but it's just a movie that's cool, man. I really dug it.
Thank you. I don't have much else to say besides that. Really appreciate it.
All right. There we go. Wrap the show.
That's what they paid me the big bucks for.
Exactly right. I'm going to put this thing up here in the crawler. What inspired this movie?
I think you could say that passion inspired it. Like, I had just finished the first feature that I shot, and Tanner, who plays Paul in the movie, came to me, and he had seen the other movie, and he's just like, we got to make something else. He's like, I got this cabin in the woods. And I was like, why don't we make a Hallmark movie, but have it be a terrible Hallmark movie, like Christmas Comes Softly or something like that. And we were just goofing, of course. And then we kind of went back and forth on it and thought about, like, oh, what if we shot an iPhone movie like French New Wave? Or there's some New Wave movies like Eric Romer's My Night at Maud's. Mm-hmm. It's like about they're French, of course, but like about the French Catholic dude who gets stuck in the same room as a divorcee and hijinks ensue. And
right.
So that was kind of like, well, we should do something like that. And maybe I was like, but then it's like every other cabin movie with two people talking. Not that there aren't some great ones, but then I was like, well, what if we had their exes show up in the form of characters, like, surrealist touch. And so that's sort of kind of where that part of it started, but I was still in post-production on the other movie. So then Tanner was like, can I take it to my buddy Marshall? And him and Marshall, our producer, they came up with another outline that kind of introduced this element of truth or dare, like this couple that's like, let's be completely honest with each other over the course of a weekend. And then they workshopped that, and they came back and they're like, hey, do you want to do this movie? And I was like, let's do it. So it just really came from, the desire to make something. And a lot of it was just, inspired by a feeling of wanting to make a movie that could be good within the constraints, like, so then when an element would come up, like, well, let's make a relationship movie. Well, what kind of thing really speaks to us? Well, like, what hasn't been explored as much? Well, maybe the spiritual element hasn't been explored as much. The Christmas element came in because when we went to the location and we were listening to Christmas music, and we're like, this has to be a Christmas movie.
Nice.
I just too much nostalgia with Christmas not to be. So it kind of was these different passions and desires coming together to supply sort of the raw paint, and we just mixed them together over the course of the process. So it's not like some grand, I have a vision for this work of art.
Right.
It's more like, let's do something good, but let's do something.
No, I love it. And you guys did do something. One of the things that's great about all movies is that they're all impossible projects. I mean, it sounds like at this point in your career, you've reached the point where it's no longer impossible, but I would still say movies are improbable. Even how many movies have the right names behind them and still don't get made for years and years, if ever, Moneyball was a project that just could not get off of and then when they do, it can be like, well, you know what? It was good we waited. We got it done right,
Yeah. We got Aaron Sorkin to rewrite.
Right. Yeah.
How often do you get Steve Zalian rewritten by Aaron Sorkin?
Yeah. Second time today that Sorkin was brought in because of what he does well. That was brought up earlier today. in our show with Benjamin. I wanted to mention too, David Bianchi has been on the show before, and you cast him in the movie. Let's talk a little. Let's give him a little bit of love because he is an interesting dude, and boy, does he gives you. He's like a Swiss Army knife in terms of acting and what he can bring.
Oh, he's a great actor, an even better friend, a jack of all trades. He actually was a lot of help on my other film. He brings a level of commitment and passion to a project that is just so fun, professional, elevates your material. But it's kind of a funny story how he got involved in it. He's my neighbor where I was living in LA. There's one of those apartment complexes where there's like the Twilight Zone mirror image of that on the other side. And you're like, where did I go? And he lived in the same apartment on the other side, 210-2, and I lived on 210-1. And so my mail would sometimes go there. And we had talked film a couple times and I had seen his work. And he brought me my mail one day and I was like, do you want to be in a movie? And he was like, well, are you any good? And I was like, well, let me show you my other stuff. So that was kind of how it was, and then he's like, okay, let's do this. And, he, just like all the other actors, we had the script, but then he just brought so much more to it through the rehearsal process. And for me, it was fun too, because, Dave typically plays a sort of intense character, a lot of his work. And so I was kind of interested in showing a more sensitive side or more restrained side or playing with things that just getting different looks, and that was a lot of fun. So definitely hire Dave, everyone.
Yeah. And if you're looking on the screen, there's David Bianchi's episode, and intensity is a great way to describe who he is, how he does it. He actually came on and read a poem he wrote about George Floyd and not being able to breathe. And obviously when someone is impassioned and they, have any kind of strength in poetry and can perform it, you're left with a reality it's uncomfortable, as the George Floyd story should be uncomfortable for people because, that's not what anybody wants. But you get a real sampling of what he brings to a movie. And it's interesting. So just like neighbors, like, oh, hey, we hang out. Whatever. But you guys weren't even really friends. This is like a happenstance meeting. Were you aware that he existed before you guys got on this venture?
Yeah, I mean, I had bumped into him in the parking lot before on his phone, being all producery, and so I'd asked his advice on when I started writing and trying to put something together initially on my first project. I had come to him for guidance, and then we'd sort of just kind of run into each other, be like, hey man, and keep going. And then it was just like, oh, this would be a great opportunity to do something with Dave. So and then subsequently became friends through that.
When people do their own movies, they are typically multi-hatted. You, of course, fit the bill there, director, writer, that kind of thing. Why is it that in these cases, it's not director, writer, lead actor? It's always these behind the scene things. You don't take a big hunk of the acting cake for yourself. What is that about indie films when that's often the thing?
Well, I think usually when you're talking about an indie situation, you're talking about, if you want to direct, for example, like you're talking about probably your first time really dealing with the managerial side. Directing is a lot of it is managing. You cast well, and you might have some directing notes, some camera notes, but if you hire properly, it's much more collaborative. That being said, you are in charge of a lot of moving parts. So I think, for me, I did, came from an acting background, theater background. I always sort of felt, and I had a little part in my first movie, but for me, it's like you want to nail it to the wall. And if you're worrying about, also on an indie film, you're worrying about things that you wouldn't worry about. It's easier on some level, it's easier for Mel Gibson or Clint Eastwood or somebody like that to be in their own movie, or even Joseph Gordon-Levitt, when you've got somebody that can bring you a monitor when you're done with a take and you've got everybody's doing their job, not when you're like, hey, somebody forgot the tacos. What are we going to do? It's like, so you have to have the bandwidth to be able to deal with a lot of hats. And that's just one that I think is really tough to be switching back and forth when you're in charge of something that if a little thing goes wrong, it's your whole project. There's no backup quarterback for a lot of this.
Yeah, I love
so
it. I love
you got to be willing to back up.
And one of the joys of doing your own project, whether a movie or a podcast that goes around the world, is that sometimes the gardeners are in the backyard when you record, and you just have to kind of persevere. Today we have the blower guy next door, so
Oh, I thought that was like part of your sound effects.
yeah.
You got a guy in the corner going.
Make it realistic. The question I wanted to ask, and I asked this of a lot of guys who have to do their own things, you have to put on more hats than you have time and budget for. Like you have to. What are some of the hats that you would like to, or let me ask this a different way. What are some of the hats that you've been able to give away to other people because you now can afford to, because you've got some budget and a track record of doing this, even if it's, not a lengthy 70 movie back, you're getting money for doing this now. And then what are some of the hats you'd like to get rid of? Because, it's like, just Jesus, I've got so much to do.
Crafty. No.
That's hilarious, though. Slow down for a second there. Not everybody knows who that is or what that is. Like
catering.
Yeah.
Catering is
Catering.
food. I didn't have to deal with that on Evergreen, but
but still, though, like you just used the taco example, and it's so true. Like, what do you mean? Oh, God damn. All right.
Oh man, they're tired of pizza. They're gonna revolt. It's free food.
Right.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's all logistical that I tend to. There are parts of things that are logistic that I like. Like I love to be involved in scouting on an intimate level because that gives me a lot of qualities you wouldn't have. Like there are things that, especially even in your writing, but that do that. But when you're directing, when you can really have sort of the tactical quality of a place, that's informs so many different things in terms of how you see a place or feel a place and want to shoot it. So there are some things that I'm like want to be more involved in. I think most of it is the day-to-day of producing that, being able to walk on set and not have to worry, like somebody hands me a schedule and I'm like, cool. That's not having to kind of come in the night before and work on that schedule with the AD and try to figure out how are we going to get all this in, or, just to be able to come on set and have it bracketed off certain questions, I think is what I look forward to most.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I mean, because there are just so many things that a director and, ultimately a producer has to worry about. I just had Tony Toast on a couple of weeks back, but the podcast version dropped this week. And he was talking about like one of the people he didn't appreciate before he really got in and started making TV shows and everything is the prop person. Like you're like, yeah, we're going to set this in the 20s. And there's this scene where this guy's going to throw up a hair wax can and the other guy's going to shoot it, bang, real fast. He's like, and it never occurred to me that someone has to now go find a hair wax can. And then if they bring them what I don't want, even though I don't know what I want, like they need to have option B through F. And, he's like, that's just an impossible job. And I didn't realize how much of a craft it was. And then how like what it involves for that person to anticipate my needs so well and respond to any outlandish thing I can cook up in my head. Now, I'm kind of speaking for Tony, but this is the thing, right? Like there are so many different things that you can come up with and someone has to provision that. And it's just remarkable when you think like, well, how about these 50 cars, and all these things that you have to account for. It's insane. So I guess my question about that is, as you look at your movie and you try to put it together in your head, are you conscious of these things in terms of like, okay, I'm not going to get fancy here. We're going to write a movie that doesn't have a lot of extras. Are you writing with a budget in mind, or are you writing this movie with some other kind of purpose?
Oh, totally. I think the best line producer, the best person in charge of the budget is the writer. You can make a decision that costs a ton of money, or you could make a decision that doesn't cost anything. I even think about setups. Is this going to, if we're changing location, is this going to add more time to the schedule and we're not going to be able to get it? So I like to place those constraints in advance so that they don't come later when you've made a creative commitment that you have to compromise on. I like to make the sort of the banks of the river up front so that you just can flow inside that, play inside the game that you create, because you always have constraints, and I always like to get out in front of them in that way.
Yeah, no, it's smart. It's smart. as you look at these constraints and trying to limit everything, you're also looking at like the full package. You must have a sense for what it costs you to make a movie with all of these twists and turns in it. Time wise too, you're like, that's going to take us 3 weeks and it's going to take us $2 million or whatever that number is. I'm just making stuff up here, but do you have a pretty good eye for that? Or do you need to sit down and go through it? What is your process to figure out how long, what this thing's actually going to cost?
Because for example, on my first feature, I was like a producer on this one, more of a co-producer on this one. But those kind of experiences give you a lot of insight into how much something's going to cost because you've written a check for it. You're like, oh, okay, that's how much a day costs, or how much, I wouldn't say I'm any kind of expert, but I'm usually fairly cognizant of how feasible something is, how much it's going to be roughly, or how long it's going to take.
When you sit in front of someone who's going to invest in your movie and you pitch this movie, what does that sound like? Because I can do a terrible job of pitching it and not get any money. I'd be like, a couple goes and are honest with each other, and the movie's just uncomfortable because you're watching a fight the entire movie, even though it's not exactly that. But that's how I would sort of pitch this thing. But I'm not a professional producer pitcher.
I wouldn't necessarily take that hat myself. I mean, since we sort of made this ourselves, it wasn't something that I had to do so much. But, I would definitely kind of say that it's, kind of a throwback to 70s era filmmaking and sort of like an anti-Hallmark movie. Like, what if you took the Hallmark model that you're familiar with and put real people in it? I think one of the funniest things about Hallmark movies is it's always like they go back to the small town and realize that the evil of soulless corporate cookie cutter mall, or she's got to stop the something being bulldozed, and it's like, oh, the small town is full of charm and light and real people. Meanwhile, they're in a corporate soulless movie. So just trying to appeal to people that like a certain kind of, it's saying that it's like a Duplass Brothers movie or something like that. But at the end of the day, it kind of is. I don't think I have a great pitch for it.
You don't need to. You pitched yourself, so there is that.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like if Hallmark came to you and I and said, Pete, you're such a good producer of things, why don't you and Joe make a Hallmark movie for us? We would be like, yeah, okay, let's do it.
Totally.
Because you got to get paid. There's a funny rule. I think it's Hallmark, could be Lifetime, could be both. You cannot have a scene in a bowling alley. That's an instant no. They won't let you do it. And who knows why, but that comes from an actor friend of mine who's been in a lot of those movies. And he's like, I don't know what it is, but they don't like that. Okay. So religion is a character in this movie, or at least a part of a character that is it's not so risque anymore or anything, but it doesn't come across as this wholesome kind of thing. It kind of comes across as a bit of a character flaw, if I was going to portray it, because this person's sort of, I don't know. I mean, the main character has this religious requirement that's kind of unrealistic given where he's at in his relationship and everything else.
Well, yeah, I think it depends on your point of view. I think the tough part is he kind of pursues that commitment in an unfair way. It's sort of examining someone who is failing to live up to what he believes and how the consequences that has, and sort of learning to forgive oneself through that. Because conversely, with Gina, there's sort of a returning to the parts of it that were meaningful to her by the end, or seeking to sort of reclaim that in herself. So I think the religious element is more an exploration of how faith affect, how the way that people internalize their faith can shape them in a lot of ways for good, or how they respond to it, or for, to do it in the wrong way, I suppose. But I don't necessarily think that it's unrealistic to live the way that Paul wants to, but I don't think he's being honest with himself about it. I think he's being unfair to Gina about his limits and, putting himself in a situation where he's going to be hypocritical and be hurtful as a result.
Let's talk a little bit about Tanner, who plays Paul, the lead character. He's pretty easy to hate, like it's hard to, he's one of those, he did such a great job. And I mean this in a complimentary way, 100%. He is so unrealistically unrealistic. Like he's so off to his girlfriend that you're like, I do not like this guy. Gina, don't do it. Which is an absolute credit to his acting, because I'm sure he's a wonderful dude in real life, but it's just, it was interesting to see him. I call it like doing the Glenn Close thing, where like, I don't like Glenn Close because she played in Fatal Attraction. I don't like that lady at all, but she's acting, but she was so good at acting that you're like, I can't trust this Paul guy, and Tanner and Paul, are they the same person? He really did it.
Yeah, he's a very talented guy. I don't think they're the same guy at all, but that's a credit to him.
But I think that's a hallmark of being a great actor, is taking the role on and really creating that emotional value. I'm really big on affect over effect. Like, he would show up, and the more he would open his mouth, the more I'm just like, this guy. I mean, it was really working in that negative Hallmark kind of way, the mirror image of the Hallmark movie. He wasn't this charming, flashing in the winning smile. Oh, I just stayed in town and became the handyman. Like I paint portraits and stuff. Like he wasn't that guy.
Yeah, no, it was important to me to have characters who were flawed in a real way. And I think it was a fine line with Paul, because I have a lot of sympathy for him. But, and I think ultimately when you find out what it is that he's hiding, as it were, I think that there comes a degree of understanding for that person. That's always what we were after, was the two broken people trying to work it out. And however unlikable he might come across to some people, it's ultimately, he's a person that's been through some things.
Yeah, for sure. And you can sense that there's like the dam is breaking on his maturity, and he's going to reach a new level. That couple had some things to work through to sort it out. I don't want to give away the movie too much, but let's talk about the Gina character and her side of it, because she also brings quite a bit of stuff to this that they have to work out. That was played by Amanda Maddox. And talk about putting her in the role. I know Tanner came to you and said, let's make a movie. But what about Amanda? How did she get involved in the project?
Our producer, Marshall, played soccer on like a local weekend kind of team who had been familiar with her. And so he reached out and said, you want to send us a tape? And she sent us a tape, and we were pretty much like, yep, that's Gina. Yeah, she just had a sense of the character that was, and what she brought to it, and a lot of similar things. She just kind of understood the story and understood who that person was.
In Hallmark movies, it snows beautifully and pleasantly. It's never like the snowplow comes by and buries your car. No one ever gets stuck or slides off into a ditch. There's no wind. It's just weather you can wear a sweater to. Yeah. When you guys took on the weather, because I'm assuming you guys filmed this in the cold, in the actual snow, that was
yeah, Christmas time. Right, December, the first part of December.
And how was that? Does that present any challenges when you guys did scenes that involved the outside?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was freezing cold. At one point the camera got too cold. It was way, way, way in the deep woods in Colorado. So there was always a concern that there was going to be slide and people were going to not be able to get out. And, we had to ferry people back and forth. And it was always a issue to contend with. Luckily, nothing too bad, and it did snow, so I didn't have control over the quality of the snow. But it was nice that it did snow a couple times. But most of the time it was just really cold.
And then when did you wrap the principal production on this thing? Was it pre-COVID, and you had all this stuff in the can already, or when did
yeah, we already kind of going around the festival route before COVID hit.
Because the movie dropped in 2019, correct?
That's when we started doing the
Okay, yeah.
festivals. Things.
We talked earlier on, I mentioned, like there are surprises that happen in indie films because you find yourself in a location and you simply turn the camera around and there's the perfect location for this other scene, that kind of thing. What were some of those things that were realized in the middle of production that wouldn't have happened otherwise?
The going around in the town, Tanner and I had spent time in the town and we just really liked it. So we were just like, we got to shoot something in the town. We didn't find the church until, like 3 or 4 days before my brother found that location. There was a lot of things like that where we had to improvise because, that shot isn't going to work. Or initially in the script, they were going to go skiing. But then they didn't. That wasn't going to work, so we had to pretend. Had to have them do a game where they pretended they were going skiing, and what else? A lot of times there's scenes that come later in editing. Like we had shot sort of a surreal. There's a scene where Paul is sort of remembering when he and Gina got together, and initially that was like a scene that was shot surreally, and it just didn't quite work that way, the way we shot it. But then we're like, what if we just do it as a voiceover with like a radio play? And so there's a lot of things like that, or improvisation. There was a tree. There wasn't a tree to decorate, or one outside. So there was like a half cut down tree, or we wanted to make a snowman. There wasn't a snowman. So they like piled up a bunch of snow, put some carrots on, snow hump. Yeah. Things like that.
That's great. I mean, because I saw the Christmas tree and I thought, what a curious choice to do this half cut down thing. And, I thought that was actually part of the story as it was drafted, but to find out that came on the back.
Oh, no, that was just the only tree around. I was like, well, play it off like this is not what you wanted and do this,
But it fits the weekend. It's like this, you have a vision of this Christmas tree in your head, but what you get is this, someone else, the remains of what wasn't the Christmas tree.
Yep.
I love it. When Amanda and Tanner are together on screen, did you see anything surprising from them in terms of chemistry or what they were able to do? What did you see through the director's lens?
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
Did you see anything surprising from them in terms of chemistry or what they were able to do? What did you see through the director's lens?
I saw them through the director's lens. They were on camera. It was just interesting to see the different things that they brought out of each other in terms, what dynamic that they had initially, and when we were shooting, just the different, like the sort of way that they played off of each other's pain, and they were kind of sensitive to each other, like kind of leaning into like, these people know how to what thread to pull sort of naturally, and then that, and sort of leaning into, they had that sort of, the relationship sort of rested on this playfulness that concealed a lot of hurt and resentment in the story, and that kind of came out of rehearsal, that was like something that they discovered, the sort of kind of underlying knowing that it's not quite right, but not knowing why, and end up having it be that lack of transparency. I may have just talked around the issue there, but that, I think that's a tough question to answer, because there's so much that two people bring to the table that you're always surprised by a choice. And I think, particularly, when people are swinging for the fences. And I think I was really, especially in like the final scene, there was such a vulnerability there between the two of them that it's moments like that stick with you when
Well,
director.
you're getting it kind of sort of like why I asked the question the way I did, and what I'm trying to get to is we got there, and it's the look, they're pros, you're a pro, but you're asking them to act on feelings that we've all had, we've all experienced, betrayal or our own shortcomings in terms of relationships, or you have to dredge these feelings up. I mean, depending on the actor, but you have to like really go, what does this feel like? What emotion is this? And really their job is to get to the essence of it. And then your job is to shove them and shove them and shove them to really do all of it and not be afraid. And I know, again, you guys are all pros, you know how to do this, but it does take some courage on your part to ask them to go and break open these wounds potentially. I mean, there's certain roles, like we had a guy on who played Suge Knight a whole lot. And he's like, yeah, I got to be careful about accessing that character because there's potentially damage, because he looks just like him. So he gets cast as him all the time. And so he's got to play this maniacal thug who, harms people. And he's like, I don't want to be that guy, but I get paid to be that guy. So, they have these things, these costs to doing any kind of role. How cognizant are you of that? And then what is obviously you got a movie to make, but it's not as simple as that, I don't think.
Well, I'm always aware of, I like to spend a lot of time with the cast beforehand so they know them as people and know what kind of motivates them, what makes them uncomfortable, what's a place that I don't want them to have to go through to get what they need to get. I'm not a huge fan of psychologically manipulating your actors to shoot a gun off in their face to get them scared. Not like William Friedkin stuff. So for me, it's much more about learning their particular acting styles and the language and the things that they respond to, and trying to supply them with the things that they need, if they need anything from me, to sort of be ready with that. But a lot of it comes from just spending a lot of time in rehearsals and building that trust, so that, it's important to me that you establish this sense of that your actors know that you're there, you have their best interests. I don't necessarily like the model that's confrontational, or you're using too much of reality or their discomfort in reality to get them there. More, it's like, let's get to a place where we can make believe. Let's get to a place where we're safe to do that, and not have to do extreme odd artsy things to get these performances. But I think, a lot of it is trust, and I try to be fairly even keeled. Not super, I don't know what the word would be, but to me, it's just about creating an environment of trust and a spirit of freedom to go there and to be honest and to tell the truth, and to sort of never have it be like there's a right thing, there's a wrong thing. It's more just like, tell the truth right now. Let's get to a place where we feel comfortable always telling the truth. And that's one of my big things, is I will say that lies if I see it in the monitor.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll do that. But
you're describing sort of like a limit. I don't want to go past this limit. Maybe it's a line. I don't know how you characterize it, but how do you know where it is? You spend time with the cast, but that doesn't mean that in the moment when they're passionate and they're trying to make this happen, that, how do you control your desire to push them harder and push them beyond your line? How do you know where that is?
Well, I think that's kind of any kind of ethical question. You have a principle. And to me, I don't want to take someone to a place that's going to cause them real damage. I don't want to take someone to a place where, they're cutting their wrists for the art, because I don't think you have to go there to get there. I think some people need to do that. Some people need to get all worked up in that way, but other people you're able to use their imagination. And that's not to say that, that I wouldn't push an actor to go somewhere vulnerable or anything like that, but not to to use a bad means for a good end. And I would consider a bad means to be anything that is, damaging to your own personal psychology or health or anything that makes you not right when you're done. I like to be able to say cut and then like talk about football and then get back to it,
And then when you're at the end of this whole road, you've pushed your actors to give you what you need to put, a good movie into the can. I'm assuming everybody was pretty stoked at the end of it. They weren't like, damn it, I went too far.
I don't think so. I mean, we were all pretty exhausted and we were pretty excited about what we had done. But, there's always more to do. I think for me also, there's always that like,
yeah,
let's go again.
Is the, okay, the work divides into several different segments. Obviously you have pre-production and all the, whatever, saving up to buy all your red vines and all that stuff, shot locations. Then there's the actual shoot, and that takes whatever, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever it's going to be. And then there's that post-production work where you're working with the sound and seeing what you've got. Which part of it would you say you like the most?
Oh, shooting it. Yeah. There's not a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think it is. I mean, there's distinct pleasure in each part of the process. I think, there's making the paints, and then there's painting, and then there's, maybe sketching is better. There's at the end of the sketch, you're erasing the things that you don't need. And I think those are, in the beginning you sketch, and then you go for all the detail and the life, and then you try to remove everything that's unnecessary. Yeah. And so each part of that, from the writing to the final edit, has its own magic. There's being alone in a room and discovering something, and then there's seeing it come to life and the adrenaline of that, and to do the communal nature of the set. I think it's all real now. It's not just an idea. And then editing is much more like, all right, let's make it work. So editing has a lot more attrition in it. It's not exciting all the time. It's a lot of, let's try it this way, let's try it that way, let's smooth this, and editing has also the worst part of the whole process, which is when you first, every director who ever lived, the first time they saw a cut of their movie was like, I'm a hack.
Yeah.
I need to kill myself.
Yes. I love it. Yes.
So if you don't hate your first cut, I don't think you can really be a director. So that's like the worst part, is like, no, what have I done? Yeah. I've wasted my life. But then as things come together over the course of it, there's magic to it, and there's a special kind of relief when you lock finally. You're like, okay. And I think it's a lot of fun to, like, especially in an independent context where you really have to get creative. It's like always, so it's great to see the things that came together and worked perfectly. But in order to make a good indie film, there's a lot of times where you're like, nothing worked there. What do we do?
Right.
Okay, we got sound. Can we reshoot something? What can we use?
Yeah.
How can we re-envision what we have? How can we make this good? And that's hard too, when you let go of your idea of what something needs to be, and you sort of discover what the work itself is telling you it wants to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you have two good parts and they just won't go together, you're like, interlude? What are we doing?
Dance sequence.
Let's just have them slow dance real quick.
Musical interlude.
What did you pick up? What made you a better writer director after this movie? Because everything for years and years, decades, you're going to learn every time you do this. So what did you learn this time?
I mean, I think I learned something in every phase. This one was a lot about just the greatness of collaboration, and how to collaborate better, learning how to speak different languages, work within different constraints, instead of instead of a top-down model, learning a more like, how do we do this as a democracy? How do we come to a common vision? I think that was the best lesson that I learned from it, is just learning how to navigate a lot of different voices and try to synthesize them into a common vision.
Yeah, that's a great way to put that. Sometimes you're always the director, you're always the producer, or whichever role it is that you're going to be. You can always make the shot or call the shot, but sometimes you need to see what the group has to say. Like that, when you're talking about like, I'm a hack, you're usually in a dark room by yourself editing, maybe your best friend's next to you, and you do need that voice where they're like, it isn't that bad. Let's just look at these things, so you need those other people no matter what. So yeah, sure. You can always make the call, and it's your call to make, but that learning how to be comfortable with someone else's approach or someone else's point of view, not to the point of holding you back, but to the point of creating an opportunity to really make this thing better than the sum of its parts. That's a powerful lesson. I think we all in these creative spaces are trying to do that. How do I run this thing, lead it, but not be a tyrant, and allow greatness to show up and realize it when it does?
Yeah. Never think that you know the answer,
Right. Yeah.
Or know what you don't know, as Plato would say, or Socrates.
Right.
Somebody in a toga.
When I work on these, I should probably wear a toga more when I'm making these decisions too. But when I'm doing these creative endeavors, if I'm like, no, instant no, and I'm like, I've learned to go in my head, I'm like, okay, that's an instant no, and that's a mark on you. Slow down. You may still say no, but that instant rejection is for me a sign that I didn't even take this idea seriously. I didn't even contemplate it. And it's fine to say no to that thing, but it's not fine for me as when I produce my things to just out of hand reject something unless it's very specific. Like, I know that costs money. I know that costs time. And these are things I have, these are constrained things. No real question there. Just kind of bringing that.
Oh no, that's quite all right. Gives me a chance to drink my coffee.
Oh yes, of course. All right, so look, we're about 50 minutes or so into this thing. What I want to ask you now is, what's next, man? I mean, Evergreen was cool. I dug it, and I know that Tanner's going to show up. Wait, hold on, is that his name? Tanner, or is it Paul? I get him. I can't get that guy's name right. When Tanner shows up at your door, like, let's make something else. Surely you have something you've already been thinking about, because this movie has been, I'm doing quoted fingers, done for quite some time now.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is trying to, I would love to be able to move into sort of episodic stuff and get some chances to do that. But in terms of other projects, Tanner and I have actually been developing a sequel to this movie. So we've been working on that, and I have a couple other scripts in mind, but I'm looking to get something off the ground this year because I'm just itching to get back in the game, but nothing in the docket yet.
Right.
However, if anybody wants a director for hire, right, I will do it.
I love it. Always
not desperate.
Did you see a couple years ago The Invitation, that movie?
Was that black and white?
No, it was a color movie, but there was really important color. It was red. Anyhow, I'll just keep this short. But basically, a bunch of guests get invited to a dinner in the Hollywood Hills, and it's just kind of the same pace as your movie. So whenever I get a movie that kind of goes this pace, I'm like, is everybody about to get murdered? Because
oh yeah, there's a version of Evergreen where he like looks up in there and then it's a ghost and she eats his face.
Yeah. Is that true?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Because I hope so. But
I just remember thinking the premise. I'm like, actually, well, there's some shots in it that are like way more influenced by like my love of noir or something like that. And I was like, sometimes I would look and be like, is this a horror film?
Yeah, right. It's a horror.
It's an emotionally horrible film.
Yeah.
The monster is inside us.
That's right. Yes, I've released my emotions, and my emotions are the monster.
Nothing more terrifying. I'd take a monster over a weekend like that.
It's an uncomfortable weekend for sure.
I'd rather fight a werewolf.
It's what makes the movie great, though. I mean, if you want to have watch a couple go through some shit in a movie, the Evergreen is the answer. Let me put the link up. Everybody should check out Evergreen on Amazon.
This is the answer for all of your childhood trauma being dredged up.
That's right. This is
This is what you need in COVID.
This is how you make a bad premise to go on a vacation with your lover. Like, let's tell each other the total truth.
That's a horrible thing to do.
It's yeah. I mean, it's a great ride. It also kind of reminded me of Indecent Proposal, in that, they're this couple on the edge of something, and they test their relationship. And that is like, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to spoil the end of the movie, but that doesn't matter what happens at the end, but it matters what happens in the middle. Like that's it. That's the grist right there.
Yeah, we always know in a romantic comedy, we always know like the couple's going to end up together. So it's about somebody's going to win or lose. We know how most games are going to go. We want to see the players.
Yeah.
We want to see LeBron go for 30.
That's right. Yeah, see LeBron go for 30, dunk, and then cry or something at the end. Whatever.
I'd be fun to see LeBron cry.
Yeah.
After dunking.
Who would you cast? And if you could get anybody you want, and not necessarily an actor, like would it be LeBron?
Bill Murray. Who? Wait, what was the question?
Who would you cast in a movie? Like, who do you want to direct?
Bill Murray.
Bill Murray. Why?
Because he's the best. No, what I love about Bill Murray is just that there is a humanity to it. There's the jaded humanity to him. I mean, he's hilarious. I mean, Groundhog Day is one of my favorite movies, but there's just something about how he sees the world that has always, vibed with me. Though conversely, Tom Cruise.
Yeah, Mr. Intense.
Just called The Run.
Yeah.
And the whole movie is Tom Cruise running. It'd be like one of those one take movies in real time. It's just him running.
Just waiting for something to happen. It's already happening. He's running.
Yeah. He's going to die in space, I think. That's what's going to happen.
Oh my!
That's the only thing that can happen to the great Tom Cruise.
He is a marvel. I mean, I wonder, and I don't want to talk bad about Tom Cruise because I love what he does, but I wonder if that.
Oh, I mean, he's the greatest human that ever lived besides Jesus.
Yeah. You think that's a happy guy though? You think he has friends? Does he even know who Tom Cruise is, or is he so good?
I don't know that he's a human being.
Right.
I don't. I think he is a force of nature. He's like the fifth element. It's air, water, wind, fire. Tom Cruise.
Right.
I think he's such an interesting person because part of the fun of the irony is just he's like your friend that tries so hard. He's just like, I'm gonna go for it, 150 million%, and you're like, this is just foosball, man.
Right.
But I admire that.
I've been practicing for 16 weeks to play this game.
I will play football. This is amazing. You're like, Tom.
That's right.
No, you dropped some of your Adderall there, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, God bless, because he does incredible things. He learns how to fly a helicopter at a high level because it requires it. He learns how to sword fight because it requires it. And it's incredible to be that detached from a regular life. And I mean this in the best possible way, that you can focus on these things to the degree that he does, because I couldn't do it. I'd be like, come on, Jesus Christ, I'm going to go get a milkshake. Like he never has a milkshake.
No, just his commitment to excellence is just really admirable. And I just think he's a fascinating human being. It'd be fun to do something with him. But the last thing he'd ever do is a Mindy movie.
Hey, you know what? You can ask.
It's like, are we gonna be in a house in a volcano? Yes, we are. We'll build a special house for the volcano. Yeah. And then you and Nicole Kidman and Katie Holmes can show up, and then all of your exes will show up.
What about Mimi Rogers? Got to have Mimi Rogers in there.
Yeah, all of them. He goes into the volcano in the volcano house, and then all of his exes show up. Right. And he has to run from them, but there's nowhere to run because lava.
Can he all of a sudden attach, and it's like Mecha Cruise, and they all come out together, 5 parts as one?
His exes come together and
yes.
Yeah. Show me the money. Off the
That's
rails.
hilarious. Yeah.
See, that's the thing. Just when you think of Tom Cruise, it's just childhood delight.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I mean,
so Bill Murray.
but the thing
I
is,
just love a comic actor that can. I think comic actors have an understanding of tragedy that is just really. They understand. They're usually drawn to humor as a way of the desire to make someone laugh. Often can come from a sense of what it feels like to not laugh and to be alone. And so I always find that there's just like a beautiful quality in a comic actor turning in a dramatic performance. Besides being hilarious, there's just like another level of human understanding that I just love. And
yeah,
Bill Murray is like the top of that list for me.
Bill Murray is one of those people that you probably do a pretty good imitation of because he's attainable, you know, in his actions. And he primarily only acts with his face. He's not like a body actor at all. His voice is a big part of who he is. I have a question about, so Sean Connery just passed, and obviously he's a legend in Hollywood. But at some point, because this has happened to all of the great actors, no one does a good Jimmy Cagney anymore. No one does a good John Wayne anymore. At some point, everybody does a Sean Connery, just like they used to do a John Wayne. But at some point, that's not going to be the case. And you can be like, you know, that's the Chicago way or whatever it is, right? Like that's going to be the thing. And they're going to be like, what is that? What are you doing? You're like, that's Sean Connery. Don't you know Sean Connery? And it's going to go right by him. You'll be like, that guy really is really dead. How long does that take?
How long does it take for someone to really die?
Yeah, to really be dead.
Probably faster now because of Instagram and Twitter. We're just increasing the half-life exponentially.
Yeah, yeah.
I think Sean Connery will last a long time because the clips of Celebrity Jeopardy, people will be like, who's the guy in the SNL videos? Who are they making fun of?
Right.
And no one will know that it's Sean Connery 100 years from now, but those videos will last because they're memes. And memes are like cockroaches. They're not going to die in a million years until cell phones die.
This is 100% true. I was bending down to get some cleaning supplies under the sink. This is not in any way, you know, fancy. Everybody does this, but I heard the words, let it snow. And so I said, let it snow, you know, it was automatic. You know, I mean, my mind is focused on pledge or whatever it is. I just, in the back of my head, I don't even know if the words were said out loud. It just popped into my head and I had to do let tits now because it's just, yeah, that is how you live, right? Like that's truly still being alive.
His memory will go down generation to generation and we'll completely forget he was James Bond and we'll only know that he was the guy that made obvious double innuendo puns. On Jeopardy. That's his legacy.
That's it. That's going to be what it is. Yeah.
It's like Jared.
And Burt Reynolds too. I mean, you know, hilarious. Yeah. That was such a great, I was thinking that's like one of the best sketches they've ever done because it's just gonna, you know, the cowbell, that even the older ones, they don't have that length that this I think is gonna, we'll see.
Well, I'll turn that back on you. How long do you think Christopher Walken lasts? I mean, is that not the number one impression ever?
Yeah, it's got to be up there, right? It's got to be because
everybody's got a bad one.
Yeah,
and
yeah. One of the things too, because cinema and TV performance and acting has evolved. It's not like the stage brought to, you know, a screen. And so, you know, you don't have people talking like they used to in the early 1900s. You know, they're like, bah! You know. Like,
sit here, Marge.
Yeah, coppers. Yeah, no one does that.
You dirty rat.
Right.
I'm going to slip you my lip for a Harlem sunset, pal.
Yeah. No one would talk like that anymore. I mean, there's a modern form of that, I'm sure, but I can't think of what it is.
I'll go for a week. No.
Can you imagine if one of those guys was your friend and you're like, dude, do you really talk like this?
I think that's probably what it's like to be Nicolas Cage's friend.
Oh, man. Yeah. 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 He is, and I love Nicolas Cage's work. We used to look a lot like when we were younger, but when he makes that choice, that Tom Cruise intensity choice, because he's equally as intense, he does not care if he knows halfway through it's going to be a belly flop. He will not surrender it, you know, like, because he doesn't nail it like Tom does. Sometimes he's like, oh, this is going to be bad, you know.
He just goes 100% all the way.
Every time.
This is the man that stole the Declaration of Independence. I wouldn't expect anything less.
All right, well, listen, man, it's been awesome chatting with you. I really appreciate it. Everybody check out Evergreen. The link is there on the show if you're watching live. And if you're going to watch, if you're going to listen on the podcast side, I'll put the link into the show notes. But look, listen, I appreciate you coming on and chatting with me about movies and everything. It's such an honor to have you guys who are figuring it out. Like, this is your dream and you're doing it. And it's wonderful to explore that with you, because we don't all get to do this. We don't all have it's not, and I don't know if you know this, it's not always comfortable doing what you love to do. Sometimes it's terrifying.
Nope. Most of the time it sucks. but
it's
at the end of the day,
it's so wonderful. Right?
You can live with yourself when you go to sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, seriously, thank you. Everybody go check out Evergreen on Amazon. And Joe, again, one more time, thank you and have a happy holiday.
Thanks for bringing me to the yurt.